165,000 people, then those guys are not represented. And there is no point of you subjecting them into a competitive and defranchising voting just to yield an undemocratic result of a stolen democracy. So that is the failure of the IEBC. Why were they not able to delineate the boundaries? Why were they not able to delimit the boundaries? And the Constitution says they must be done within 8 years,
yes,
and not more than 12 years. So why should the member of rural constituency go for voting?
Very, very, very good question right there. And Mr. Agwanda, I know you have more to talk about this, but let's just shift gears to education. Parents continue to decry what they term as limited time to adequately prepare to have their children back to school for term 2. They have since called on the Ministry of Education to put mechanisms in place to ensure parents are cushioned enough during these harsh times. A spot check at various school items shop revealed no much activity as it is the norm during school reopening days. The sellers are blaming it on the short holidays. Let's take a look.
In such school items shops like this one in Nyeri town, no much activity witnessed as very few parents have turned up to purchase items for their kids who are reporting back to school. Julia Nyambura, a parent, is among the few who have come to ensure they get their children's items in readiness for term 2. For her, it is unbearable, and the inadequate time that was the short holiday for the learners wasn't enough time to prepare.
Tumepewa muda kidogo na walimu, pesa hatujapata school fees. Hizi nazo ni uniform, inabidi watoto wanunuliwe uniform. Tungeomba ya serikali tuongezee muda kidogo ndio tuweze kutafuta school fees. Michael Ngatia too is here to purchase school items. He is overwhelmed too. Sellers painting the real picture of how times are hard as the sales have dwindled.
Muda umekuwa mfupi sana kuwa nao hiyo holiday na mambo ni ngumu kwa wazazi, lakini bado tunangangana tu tutaweza hadi wasome. Kwa budget ya kuingiza mtoto school fees, uniform na nini, nahitaji kama 20,000. Na hiyo 20,000 kupata saa hii na vile hakuna biashara ziko chini, inakuwa changamoto kwa sisi wazazi sana.
Siku kama ya leo hatuna wateja wengi. Tulikuwa nafikiria watakuja kuchukua uniforms juu ya back to school, lakini tumeshida vile mumeona. Wazazi wanalia sana juu wanasema wamefinywa sana. Juzi tu mwezi ya 7 walirudisha watoto shule na sasa tena wako home. After a week wanaambiwa tena wanunue warudishe watoto.
The academic calendar was greatly disrupted following the coronavirus pandemic, and the Ministry of Education, in efforts to harmonize it, have resorted to shortening of holidays. The second term is expected to last for 11 weeks, and complaints from parents about some school heads hiking school fees catching the attention of the ministry have directed school heads to roll over any monies paid in excess to the second term. In an interview with the Standard newspaper, Basic Education Principal Secretary Joanne Julius says, quote, "We are asking the school heads to ensure they roll over to second term the extra money parents might have paid during term 1 so that they do not pay extra money again," end of quote. Joanne further saying school heads can help mitigate second term challenges if they listen to their students and curb indiscipline cases. He was reacting to growing cases of fires reported in schools across the country. Alan Ochanda, KTN News.
Thank you very much, Alan Ochanda, for that piece. And of course, it's reflected on the front page of the Standard this morning. Fees reprieve for parents as schools reopen. And as you have seen in that particular story, when parents are suffering, the schools are affected, particularly when you look at the private schools, because they are really having a tough time paying those fees. And then the businesses that thrive off of a good, well-funded ecosystems also suffer, as you have seen with the uniform sellers and all the other vendors who are dependent on these processes are concerned. Now, when you look at what the ministry is saying, it's quite peculiar. Ministry acknowledges that many lost livelihoods because of the COVID-19 pandemic and are struggling to pay the tuition, and they're pushing school heads to find different solutions instead of sending learners home over their arrears. Mr. Agwanda, what's your reaction to the solution being given by the ministry?
Tricks, I run a private school. Besides other things that I do.
Yes.
When a ministry comes out and says that the ministry acknowledges that many lost livelihood because of the COVID-19 pandemic and are struggling to pay tuition, and pushes schools ahead to find a different solution instead of sending learners home, you've opened a Pandora box.
Yes, because what are these other...
What are those other ways of,
Yes.
of getting that money? One of the things that baffles me is the fact that ministry can make such a statement instead of writing a policy to the heads of institutions and saying that school fees has been halved or reduced to a half, or you're only going to pay a quarter of what you pay in the second term. If they do not direct the head teachers and say that this term parents will only pay 2,000 instead of 10,000 for the day scholars, then we are lying to ourselves. The head teacher's mandate is to collect. One of the mandates, other than imparting knowledge and ensuring that our learning goes seamlessly in schools, is also to collect resources to run the institutions, to run the school, because the government is not giving them 100% in the capacity, 100% of the money to run the school. And for that reason, that government parent responsibility of paying school fees stands. And therefore, it is not easy for you as an institution, as a principal, to say, we'll make sure that this money now, the parents can only pay this X amount of money.
Right.
That is not possible. And for Dr. Joan also to come out and say that indeed, the principal needs to sort of use the money that they had in first term to be transferred in second term. To me, that is also an ambiguous statement. The Ministry of Education must come out if they want to save the parents and say, this is how much that will be paid in second term, so that the principals are aware. This, on the same breath, the ministry, Honorable Magoha is coming out to say that there are a number of principals that are due to be disciplined by TSC because they defied the instructions that were given in second term to reduce school fees. And we know that one head teacher or principal was fired in Nakuru. What we are saying is this is not a solution to the parents. The solution must be very, very clear in terms of how much will be paid in first term and in third term and in second term. I want to conclude by saying this. What is the rush? We know that COVID-19 hit the global community. There are a number of people that took a year, some took 8 months, some took 9 months before they went back to school. I was imagining that if the intellectuals in Ministry of Education would put their house in order and say, what is the rush? Must we go back to January, November calendar year? Is it a must that we must do that? Absolutely not. In the international community, United States and in Europe and many other countries where our children go to school, when they are done with the high school, the calendar year begins in September, and some begins in late August. Why couldn't we even try to, sync their calendar year without pushing our parents with a 1-week holiday, and then they have to go back to the bookshop and buy books? I think this is unfair, and we must call upon Ministry of Education and ask them one question. Why are we rushing our calendar year? Is it written on stone? The years and the months that were with COVID-19 are lost and will never be recovered. Let's not commit it into the parents in terms of paying school fees, but let's roll up another calendar year, even if it is in sync with the international community calendar year of August, September, people going back to school and ending it in July or June or even in May. I think that to me is what will help this 1-week holiday, 2 weeks holiday, which is just too much for parents.
It is too much. Mr. Njiru, find different solutions instead of sending learners home over arrears. What's your reaction to that solution that has been given by the ministry?
Well, I think that's a very lazy proposal that lacks objectivity, that is devoid of resolving the parents' plights in this republic, and that is only being used by a person who want to shy off from crafting a solution that will solve the education crisis. We parents we're not just burdened by the books and the uniform. We're also burdened by the inability and the failure of the ministry to regularize and standardize fees. I know and I'm aware that there are various classes of schools, but all these classes of schools, irrespective whether they are high-end or normal schools, they offer the same curriculum. So up to the question of the standardization of the curriculum, there is standardization. So what we are then saying is, the ministry must come up with a policy that says, for purposes of delivering this curriculum, all schools must charge this amount of money. Then, even if the parents want to take their sons and daughters to high-ed schools, then from there, you're on your own. But at least we know and we understand that there is standardization. For example, just like the way when you're going to New York, you can choose to go to economy class or business class.
Right.
So, but even at that particular time, there are some serious standardization. So the ministry must standardize these fee issues. So that at the end of the day, we can then say we are having universal education. We can then say that under Article 27, that everybody is entitled to equal treatment and equal benefit of the law, and nobody is going to be discriminated because of his character, social orientation, or economic orientation. Then we can then be able to say that we are building a cohesive and a united republic where no individual feels left out. For example, look at the demographics and the distribution of the schools in Nairobi. We have serious high-end schools offering the same curriculum. We have another school in Mukuru Kwanjenga offering the same curriculum. And all these pupils are competing for Alliance High School. A person leaves a high-end school, competes with another person in Kibera, and you're competing for the same position. I mean, can there be injustice and inequality and iniquity such as this one? So the ministry must shed off their lazy coat, move and make sure that there is serious standardization of education in this country.
Absolutely. Yeah, some creativity needs to be applied when it comes to the solutions to this problem. That has been Ndegwa Njiru, political analyst. He's also a constitutional lawyer. Also with us this morning was Michael Agwanda, a governance expert. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us this morning and helping me analyze some of these stories that are making